Hello, you're listening to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast, yet another debrief after a defeat for the Reds, this time at the hands of league leaders Arsenal. Theo, Squires and David Lynch are both with me. We'll touch on some positives later on, but Theo, we'll start with the obvious. 8 Premier League games played, 6 of those Liverpool have dropped points in, and of course, in the league at least, it's Manchester City up next, so it could be an interesting week for Liverpool.
You've been quite diplomatic with that, haven't you? It's been painful recently, and it just feels it's getting
I'll
worse
leave the 2 quarters to you.
Yeah, Man City, like Liverpool in current form, will ship 4 against them and get absolutely battered.
4? They need to find... That's ambitious.
You reckon it'll be like 5, 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a painful week. You're hoping for some sort of reaction against Rangers on Wednesday night. But even then, as we saw last week, that's not going to be the answer, because we thought, they might have found a formation that could do a job against Arsenal. And they were just so sluggish, slow and poor defensively. We'll get to the positives in a bit, which will be 3/4 of the front 4. But yeah, it's just like this was supposed to be a chance for Liverpool to send out a statement performance against Arsenal to say, we're back. We're not going to be in title contention this year. We're too far off, but we are real business in terms of getting to the top 4. We've had our blip and we can recover. And now, mid-October, you're thinking, just get us to the World Cup. Get them to Dubai. Let them have their warm weather training camp and regroup again. But that's what the international break was supposed to be, the chance for them to regroup. It's just, when it rains, it pours. Injuries come in, players staying out of form. It wasn't a pretty watch against Arsenal, as I'm sure we're going to go into deeper detail now.
Yeah, absolutely. So many sort of different elements that we could start with. I think I said on Friday's podcast, Lynchy, that if Liverpool were to get beat, I then probably would start to get a little bit worried about the top 4 and how things are shaping up there, not least because Arsenal look so good at this moment in time. I mean, it is early in the season, only 8 games played. Liverpool do have a game in hand on Arsenal and I think on Manchester City as well. But the way it's playing, it doesn't matter how many games in hand they've got. It doesn't look like they're going to get many points in those matches.
Yeah, and that one game in hand as well is Chelsea away, isn't it? The one that got pushed back, which is not a game that you think you'd say was a guaranteed 3 points to Liverpool, because they've started to show some sort of improvement under Graham Potter as well. So, if things start tracking upwards for them, then that's going to be an even more difficult fixture. So, yeah, I think top 4 is in serious risk. I think there's too many sides around Liverpool who look like they've improved. I think not just Arsenal who obviously, at the moment look comfortable in terms of getting there. I'm sure they will have a blip at some point. I think, there are still flaws in that team. I think they're still quite a young team, and to challenge City and be up at that level consistently for an entire season is going to be very difficult for them, particularly as well if they get injuries in certain positions. I'm not sure the depth is there and the experience to match that. But I think they'll very much be, strong contenders for a top 4 finish. And then, you say that Manchester City are then nailed on, and then you start looking beyond that. If Chelsea, the amount of money, the squad they've got, the fact they've got a new manager in, and things will be feeling more positive there. And then you're looking at one more spot. And although Tottenham have had a lot of criticism this season, they still look a far better drilled side than Liverpool do at the moment. They look more capable of grinding out results, even if it's ugly. And that's something you can't say about Liverpool. And then you've run out of all 4 spots then when you consider those teams. And it looks, it's going to take a huge turnaround. And the biggest problem, I think, is that, in previous seasons where Liverpool have struggled, I think back to the centre-back injury crisis they had a couple of seasons ago, it was really obvious what the issue was, and what the solution would be. This time around, there aren't really any major injuries there anymore, or, bar possibly the 2 they picked up last night. I think, who you're looking at that could come back and fix this, I don't think anyone. I think the problems are far deeper than that, and a change of formation hasn't fixed it either. So, I think top 4 is a massive, massively, it looks ambitious at the moment. I just, unless there's a huge recovery comes from somewhere and something clicks or they work out exactly what's going wrong, then there's no chance of Liverpool getting that position. And then that obviously has some serious long-term impacts as well for a club that, doesn't exactly throw money around anyway. To lose that income would be a huge blow, and you go from looking at where Liverpool were last season, which was challenging for a quadruple. They built up massively under Jurgen Klopp from nowhere to become, a giant of European football again, to probably almost straight back to square one. It's just baffling, and it speaks to me to some complacency. I know we'll probably go into the wider issues as we go on, but yeah, it's a shocking state of affairs really from where Liverpool were last season.
Yeah, plenty to think about, plenty to do really for Liverpool over the course of the next few weeks. And it's got to come pretty quickly. Like you say, you're already quite a long way behind. You don't want to be any further away. But I think they are one of the biggest frustrations for me just watching the game yesterday was some of the things that they're doing are just really, really obvious and should be fairly simple to fix. You think of the second goal, for example, they had a period there of 25, 30 minutes of maybe not quite dominance, but certainly they were, well on top in that game. And then suddenly a stupid free kick goes wrong. They've only got 2 players back. It's a 3 versus 4. Martin Odegaard, I think, makes it 5-on-3 at one stage. Liverpool just can't get back quickly enough. It's things like that you just look at and think that's not a case of a lack of intensity that will come to. It's not a case of a formation. It's just a case of doing really simple things wrong. And when you add those up, it can very quickly, as it has done, go very, very wrong.
And the biggest insult in that second goal was it was Gabriel leading the Arsenal line, the centre-back, as whereas the Liverpool centre-backs were nowhere in sight, as they weren't really sprinting back to make up numbers. All the goals Liverpool conceded were their own fault one way or another, whether it's Trent marching over and effectively taking Henderson out, leaving a couple of men free at the centre, so Tsimikas has 3 men at the far post, one of them's going to get a tap in. The first one, where again it's a simple pass behind, teams are just getting in behind Liverpool far too easily. And the penalty, we can say it's a soft penalty all we like, but how many times did they just hack it and just give it straight back to Arsenal on the edge of the box before they finally got it out, only to find out the penalty had already been given? It's just embarrassing defending to watch. It was amateurish. And when it comes from Liverpool attacks, it's like, what on earth is going on? It's like we were watching Liverpool lose to the Liverpool side built 2-3 years ago, getting done on the counter so easily with that pace. Like, this is what we used to see Salah and Mane doing against Arsenal, what Martinelli was doing. I know he's a great player. Klopp's a massive fan. He'd love to have him in his Liverpool side. You just know what he's going to do. So it's the last minute of the half and you've got a free kick. Just leave one of your centre-backs back, leave an extra man back, and just get in at half-time. You've done well to recover from losing a goal in the opening minute. They're just their own worst enemies at the moment, and it's painful to watch. They're so slow and sluggish. There's no pressing from them. They've lost that intensity. But that was one of Arsenal's great strengths against them, that they were pressing them so hard, forcing them to make mistakes that were then leading to these Arsenal counter-attacks. And every time they ran at the Liverpool defence, got in behind, they looked like they were going to score. It's just Liverpool lost their identity. And ironically, this was against the side that played how Liverpool built their success in the first few years.
I think the intensity, Lynch, is a really important point to it. It's one of those things that you can't really fix. It's not something that Liverpool can suddenly just turn on. It's kind of started in a way that makes you think, well, they're just going to have to stick with this. This is just how it's going to be this season.
That's it. There's no fix for that. I mean, clearly there's some issue there in terms of why they can't hit that level of intensity and why that's not happening repeatedly. I asked a question to Jurgen Klopp in his press conference before this game actually about, do you think that's a physical issue? And he sort of skirted around it really and made out it was a confidence problem. The problem is that, if someone steps up and someone doesn't go with them, that's why Liverpool is so easily played through. But I just, these constant slow starts and this inability to sort of win second balls, it's just been happening all season. And surely that is a physical issue. I can't believe that there's not some sort of shortcoming there in terms of the physical intensity of these players. Now, is that because of a shorter pre-season? Did Liverpool not prepare themselves well enough for this season? Did they not have the time to do that? And if so, how do you fix it mid-season? I'm not sure how, unless you get to the World Cup break and hope that completely resets things and have a mini pre-season then with the players who don't go. Or is it sort of a bigger problem than that? Is it a problem that speaks to the idea of these players having gone too far with this manager, having not refreshed this side enough in recent years? That's something that Liverpool maybe have to consider if this is going to continue throughout the entire season. I thought it was kind of interesting actually in Klopp's Sunday quotes. He spoke about the 7-year problem that he's had at Mainz and Dortmund. And I thought it was kind of interesting that he said, at Mainz it just felt like it had come to the end. But he said at Dortmund one of the biggest problems he had was that players kept getting picked away from him, and they kept having to replace key players, and that became really exhausting to do it. That was the word he used. It was exhausting to do it. Obviously, he doesn't have that problem at Liverpool. They can retain the best players. We saw that this summer with Mohamed Salah signing a new contract. But maybe that sort of creates a new problem that he hasn't really considered, is that he's maybe showing players loyalty for too long because they're not getting picked off. He's not refreshing the side naturally, and you're not having that evolution happening. What you're ending up with is sticking with players in this really intense style of play for longer than you maybe should be doing, and therefore you ended up with a season like this where the players, and it's so many of them, it's not just one player, it's so many players just look like they can't get there. They haven't got the legs. They're losing the legs on Liverpool's time now. And that's supposition from the outside, but you just see it happening so frequently that I wonder whether that is starting to be the problem. And if that is the case, then a seriously large refresh of this squad needs to happen in the summer. And doing that then without Champions League money is, Liverpool already don't spend a lot, so that you're very concerned that enough will be done to get this team back up to challenging again. And it's, like I said earlier, it does just feel like you're at square one again, is trying to beat teams who spend more money than you with Europa League money. It's going to, maybe even Conference League money, who knows? It's going to be really, really difficult. And I think that's something Liverpool have to really sit down and have a think about, because I think this goes far deeper than just the changes of formation we're seeing or anything like that, or one player being slightly out of form. It's a collective issue, and the reasons behind that they need to have a big think about.
Yeah, and like we say, it's going to be, they've got enough time to think about it, but at the same time, it could be quite painful between now and then. And I suppose that the other big issue that we've not really touched upon so far, I mean, we have done plenty of times on the podcast, Theo, is it's 10 in 12 now where Liverpool have conceded the first goal in the Premier League. One of the ones that they didn't concede the first goal was a goalless draw, so they didn't even score the first one in that one. The other one was Bournemouth, which was 9-0, which almost doesn't count. They were one of the worst teams I've ever seen in the Premier League game at Anfield. But it does keep happening. It is a pattern. I don't think it can be concentration, because they're obviously aware of it. They know that it keeps happening. But I just don't know quite how that's got to that stage. What can it possibly be? They can't be unaware that this is a thing. And yet, every single game, it just seems to happen again and again and again.
Well, they used to have this great mentality, never say die attitude, but such great belief in themselves. And now that's just gone completely. So there's this fear in the back of their heads that we're going to concede the first goal here and struggle. And then it's happening too early, time and time again. Like the two times we've seen them look a little bit confident this season with Bournemouth and then Rangers. We got early goals in both those games, so they could relax a little bit and they were let off the leash. They could play how they wanted to play to an extent. But then they concede early on and then you're playing catch-up. And it's just strange. Like, if they'd put in a bit more fight against Arsenal, you could stomach losing 3-2 to the runaway league leaders. You're playing well, scored a couple of goals, you fought your way back, and then it's a dodgy penalty. But it's just the overall application of the performance. Against Brighton, they were 2-0 down. They never looked like they were going to get back to 2-0, and they somehow did. They went 3-2 up, and it never looked like they were going to hold on to that lead. And then when Brighton equalised, it never looked like they were going to get a late winner themselves. Against Arsenal, it never looked like they were going to equalise at any point, yet they still find a way to get the goals. And then it never looks like they're going to get the late equaliser that they need after Saka's penalty, or that they'll go into the lead at any point. They're just lacking that little bit of belief. But then it's very simplistic to say all this. Like, these are players that want every major honour going. Like, just because they're not used to losing shouldn't mean it makes them so fragile when they are in this sticky situation. It's like a lot of questions need to be asked. They need to have a long, hard look at themselves, and Klopp has to find a way to get the answers out of them. But it's just so strange to see this transition from them when, like, Mohamed Salah's contract is built on him scoring all these goals and assists and bringing success to Liverpool. It's like, well, where's the success coming from now? Virgil van Dijk looks a pale imitation of what he used to be. Trent as well, Fabinho. You can just list so many players here. So it's not as though losing Sadio Mane has completely changed how the team play. For some reason, they've just fallen apart. They've gone off the cliff. Those signs were there after the FA Cup semi-final last year. I think that's when this run started, wasn't it? When they were conceding goals early on, but they still had the momentum. They still had the adrenaline rush. They were still finding a way to win games. But now, whatever reason, after the summer, it's left them completely, and they look a mess.
I think, just to come in on that, actually, I think particularly on the first goal as well, and it sort of feeds into what I was speaking about the idea of this team maybe having gone too far. I thought on the first goal, Liverpool's midfield looked old. The loss of the ball, the turnover of the ball, every time that sort of happens, and it's happening quite frequently this season, You never feel like the midfielder's going to get back on goal side of the ball every time there's a turnover. Now, that can't happen because turnovers are going to happen in football. You're not going to play the perfect pass every time. You can't always be perfect in your protection. So sometimes someone's going to nick the ball off you, and you've got to just try and get at least alongside them, put pressure on the ball. But once the ball was lost, you almost knew Arsenal had scored straight away. And that to me just looked massively like a legs issue, and it's a goal, a type of goal that we've seen Liverpool concede a lot this season is giving the ball away in midfield and then not being able to get back in any sort of shape. And because the back four obviously is then exposed massively, they start panicking, making mad decisions like we saw from Trent for one of the goals as well yesterday. His head's absolutely chocker clearly with what's going on in the debate around him. So it's all feeding into each other. But I do think if there was one particular area where Liverpool have massively got it wrong in terms of where they needed to refresh and they needed to have bodies, it's the midfield. And I know it's been a massive debate this season, but it's an area that seems to be getting exposed time and time again and is having a knock-on effect both on the attack in terms of giving them enough ball to score goals and also protecting that defence and making someone, we're getting to a point where someone like Virgil Van Dijk, who we know is a high-quality player, we know how good he is being made to look daft on a regular basis. And that, for me, surely there's something going on in front of him that isn't right there.
Yeah, they all just look so slow, don't they? Like, on a video game or something, you want team that you build it with quick players. If it's on like Ultimate Team on FIFA Football Manager, you look at the pace. And that's simplistic to say, it's something you can laugh at. But there is no pace in this Liverpool team at the moment apart from Luis Diaz. And now you could lose him for however many weeks or whatever, if this is a serious injury he's picked up. But you look at the midfield, Henderson was never rapid. Fabinho's never been rapid. Thiago's never been rapid. You've got Milner there as well. It's like at least they could press to a point. They could win the ball back. They had that energy, and that seems to have deserted them too. And you're looking at clips from like Oxlade-Chamberlain when he first came through, or Naby Keita's like, well, at least they could move a bit. Are we really in this desperate situation now when we hope Oxlade-Chamberlain comes back from his injury and still can actually run? He's still got a bit of pace about him and he can change it up. And it's like, you say, Jude Bellingham. If Liverpool signed him, that's a bit of pace in midfield. That's someone who can press, do what they want to do. But now they're completely sacrificing getting him by being so poor that they might not get in the Champions League, have the funds to compete for such a deal, having put all the eggs in the Bellingham basket seemingly last summer anyway. Like, if you don't have that pace, you're going to be second best. You're going to be chasing shadows. You're not going to get to the ball first. And when you're playing at teams are high on confidence, they've got the momentum. Like Arsenal, they've got a lot of quick players with trickery that will cause you problems. You're never going to win that race. That's what we saw at the Emirates.
Let's talk a little bit about the formation as well, Lynchy. I mean, it definitely worked against Rangers. Obviously, the caveat being the quality of the opposition. I thought to a certain point it did work against Arsenal. There were moments where it did seem to look a bit better. But obviously, Theo there mentions the Luis Diaz injury. Trent as well. We don't know the extent of both of those, but Diaz in particular, in terms of the formation, it doesn't really feel to me, if he is going to be out for a sustained period, that Liverpool can go with a front four because they're only going to have four players to play in those positions. I know you've got Carvalho and Elliott perhaps, but it doesn't quite feel like they've got enough players in that position either. And of course, obviously, you've got one less in midfield, but you're just kind of passing that problem to a different position.
That's it. I think it shows up really that the move to 4-2-3-1 was a desperate move. Really, it was a sort of Jurgen Klopp sort of pulling levers, seeing what worked, because this squad is not built for that. You've got one injury in that position now in the forward line, and like you say, you're just down to four options, and you're at the whim then if even one of them's off form, that whole thing sort of falls apart, doesn't it? So it doesn't really work. And if you get another injury, then you're throwing in a kid and asking them to save Liverpool's season, and that's completely not fair on them to do that. So yeah, I don't think it's something Liverpool can do going forward. And I'd also say that there was so much talk, wasn't there, after the Rangers game of, Jurgen Klopp's an idiot if he goes back to 4-3-3 against Arsenal. This has solved all our problems, and then that was within 1 minute was exposed. It was complete nonsense. So I don't think Klopp should be reluctant to go back to the 4-3-3 on the basis that 4-2-3-1 worked against Rangers, and there were some positives still against Arsenal in terms of it, because it didn't give Liverpool any more structure in terms of defensively, which was the whole idea anyway. That was, Liverpool weren't struggling to score goals against Brighton, were they? That prompted this change, and they continued to score. So it's the whole reason behind it was to provide some solidity and make it easier off the ball, and that just hasn't happened at all. So ultimately squad's built for 4-3-3. You may as well go back to it now. Hope that, adding back in a central midfielder just makes something click, or these players remember what they're about, or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, you can't persist with this 4-2-3-1 now and not really have game-changing options off the bench, because that will kill Liverpool, I think. And obviously Manchester City are coming up, and I think a 4-2-3-1 against them that hasn't really been worked on massively. It will be hugely risky. I think go with what you know, and even if it doesn't work, then I just don't think the formation comes into it. There are bigger issues than that. Just your best chance surely is to stick with what you know, what you've won everything in recent years with, and just hope something finally clicks.
Let's talk about a couple of positives then before we move on to Rangers. I think there's two players I'm going to pick out. Feel free to think of any more and throw them in as well. But Darwin Nunez first, Theo. Talk about him. Obviously scored a goal, looked pretty lively, was on the last shoulder and caused a few problems. Again, he was one of those that we thought was a bit of a positive, really, against Rangers. Obviously didn't score, but got into the positions. But again, looked pretty decent for Liverpool at the weekend.
Yeah, he did. He linked up well with his fellow forwards. There does seem to be this growing connection between him and Diaz, for example. And he's good with the ball at his feet. He's just a bit of a heavy touch sometimes, but he was causing problems for this Arsenal defence, and he's made Gabriel look quite shaky, if we're being honest. He's got his goal. It was well deserved. He was unlucky not to score, I think, earlier on when he just shot, and it was a thunderous effort straight at Ramsdale at the near post. Probably should have looked to cut it back, but this is just a striker wanting to end that goal-scoring drought, to get a couple there. So hopefully getting this goal now makes him fit in a bit more. You'd say you're going to have to start him against City or Rangers, because at least, chaos is going to happen. He's going to cause a team problems. But you need to get him the ball. You need to give him some service, because, Liverpool in the first half, between the two Arsenal goals, they looked reasonable. They were creating chances. They were seemingly in control. The second half, that just didn't happen. And as soon as Diaz went off, really, and it was partly from Nunez not getting the ball at all. He can't cause teams problems if he's not on the ball, if he's not running the channels and he was just so isolated in that second half. I think I said on the podcast last week, there wouldn't be so much being said about him if Haaland wasn't scoring as many goals as he was at Man City. He is just a striker, a young striker who doesn't speak the language yet. He's adjusting to his new surrounding. He's got a few goals. It takes time. It took him time in Spain. It took him time in Portugal. But I know he doesn't really understand English. I just wish he could read the line better, because it was very frustrating seeing him going offside time and time again yesterday. That was like the one negative for me there, because he could have gotten a few more times. But there are enough positives there for him to take it as an encouraging sign. But at the same time, the fact that we're clutching to this straw after a 3-2 defeat to Arsenal, where they've not played well, it just shows how the season's going.
Yeah, every single one of those offsides as well. He looked at the linesman as if to say, "What? That wasn't offside." And then you saw a replay.
Miles off.
10 yards gone. So yeah, certainly something for him to work on, but a starting point at least. The other positive, Lynch, at risk of turning a positive into a negative, Roberto Firmino keeps scoring goals. I'm not quite convinced in terms of his defensive output. It kind of feels to me a little bit like he's the reverse of the Roberto Firmino that we kind of knew before, where he's scoring all the goals now and looks really clinical, but the other side of his game hasn't maybe been quite as good and has maybe lost a little bit of pace and sharpness. But let's try and stick to the positives a little bit. The goal was really excellently taken, and I think I'm right in saying he's already scored more this season than what he did last.
Right, well, he has been impressive in front of goal. Just, you almost didn't sort of expect him to take that as confidently as he did, because, throughout his Liverpool career, not generally been that deadly in front of goal. So it was a really, really good finish. And, we can talk about his build-up play, and maybe there has been some drop-off in terms of that. I'd agree with that, probably, but it's, goals are massively important in games, aren't they? And if Liverpool can just sort of somehow shore things up, to have Roberto Firmino as a basically guaranteed source of goals at the moment will be a major positive. And I think if he can strike up any sort of partnership with Nunez or something like that, that would be very helpful as well. Because I think one of the things I noticed, one of the rare times when Nunez did stay onside yesterday, was that Jota had the ball and didn't slip him in. There was a really clear opportunity for him to do that, and he spread the ball out to the right hand side instead, and Nunez would have effectively been on a goal. I still think even though Roberto Firmino's link up play isn't maybe not quite what it was, he would have made the right decision in that situation. And I think you could try and get the most out of that, and then that will get even more out of Nunez hopefully, because I think Roberto Firmino is the ideal player to play those little passes in behind, and Nunez we saw that when he times his run, his pace and his power means that he's basically in on goal if he gets it right. So, yeah, it is a positive from Firmino, and hopefully can keep that goal scoring form up. And like I say, if things can sort themselves out behind him, then maybe that link-up play will matter a little bit less, and he can just be getting goals that actually win Liverpool games rather than goals in defeats or disappointing draws.
Yeah, Theo's dug out the stats for us. Do you want to talk us through them, Theo? I don't want to steal your thunder after you've done the research.
So yes, Firmino's 6 and 7 in the Premier League this year. He got 5 and 20 last year, but 3 of them came against Watford, wasn't it? The hat trick at Vicarage Road. He did have the sign last year where he was getting goals off the bench. He scored at the San Siro, didn't he? He was like, he can be this impact sort of sub. It's good that he's finding the finishing there as well, but it's still a bit of concern where we were in the situation yesterday where he was the only experienced attacking option off the bench. I'm with you there. He's getting goals, but it's something lacking from the all-round game. And it's another sign of Liverpool being in transition. Like, you're stuck in this phase where you either go for your experienced players that you've probably used a bit too much, or you have to turn to the younger ones who aren't quite there yet, like Elliott or Carvalho. We've seen that in recent weeks. Elliott in midfield did an admirable job, but he's not as good defensively as, like, say, Henderson can do, or Carvalho showed glimpses, but then the 2 times he starts, he's been taken off at half-time because he's still very raw, adjusting to it. So we're favouring more the experienced head of Firmino. So if he is playing, just keep scoring goals. Like, Liverpool have to score 4 to win any game at this rate anyway, the way the defence is going. So he's given them the best chance he can.
Yeah, it still doesn't feel likely to me that he gets a contract extension. But again, that goes back to the point of they have got a hell of a lot to do in 2023 in the transfer market. But anyway, let's stick to the positives. We'll move on to the Rangers game. Obviously, Liverpool can put themselves in pretty good position. I don't think it's mathematically possible that they can progress, is it, Lynchy, in this game if they win? But if they do win and Napoli beat Ajax, I think that pretty much would confirm it. So I suppose it's one of those, if they can go to Rangers, put in a performance and win, at least the Champions League is going quite well for them.
That's it, and you're already in a position where, Jurgen Klopp said it himself, Liverpool are not in a title race, so, you've got to look, okay, where else can he squeeze some joy out of this season, and the Champions League's certainly going to be, route to that, because, this looked like a tricky group as well, so, and although they had that defeat in Naples first up, the way the fixtures have fallen is quite kind to them, really, and to have Rangers back-to-back, which is, they look like they're going to take the wooden spoon in the group, that's been quite handy, really, for Liverpool to get themselves in a really nice position in the group. Obviously, they've got to make the most of it. The game against Rangers at Anfield was quite straightforward. If didn't look it in the scoreline, but in terms of the performance, Liverpool were absolutely all over them. But if Rangers can make it tight again and have the crowd there at Ibrox really cheering them on and making it difficult for Liverpool, then you slightly worry with where Liverpool's confidence is at. Whether Rangers could just nick one from a set piece, or it wouldn't be out of the question that could happen. So Liverpool really got to go there and be absolutely on it, because like I said, that crowd could have a big influence on that. We've seen that with the Anfield crowd when Liverpool have welcomed sides who are better than they are to Anfield in the Champions League and turn them over. It's just all the more important because the Premier League is just out the window at the moment. So Liverpool, the hopes in terms of if they're going to have any trophy hopes late in the season, they need to get through this Champions League group. So this is a really, really massive game.
If they could do it as well, Theo, with a game or two to spare, again, that is going to have a knock-on effect. We saw that last season with the rotation and all of that sort of thing. I mean, that would be, particularly with a few injuries and all the rest of it, that would be a real boost for Jurgen Klopp.
It would as well, because it gives you the opportunity to try something else when things aren't quite clicking for you. Give more minutes to Carvalho as number 10 or Elliott or something in the front three, and just seeing if they could find a way to transition into the Premier League and get a bit of form there. And with the European football as well, just get through the group stages, because at this rate, winning the Champions League is probably the best chance of getting into it next year. And like after the World Cup, you've had a chance to look at the January transfer market. If you want to do anything, you've got more players back from injury. You've had the mid-season training camp. You're hoping they're in a better state, and then it's knockout football. And Liverpool, surely in a couple of games, Anfield European nights, they could stumble their way through, as Real Madrid did last year, to get to the later stages of the competition. But yeah, you need to do the business in the group stages first to get through that. They can't take Rangers for granted at all. As Lynch said, Rangers at Ibrox is going to be a very different prospect to Rangers at Anfield. You'd be surprised if they went 5-4-1 against them and just left the strikers so isolated. they've had a good European record over the last few years. They'll see this performance from the weekend, and they'll feel a little bit of confidence that they can cause an upset. If they get an early goal, they know Liverpool will be rattled and they'll be there for the taking. So Liverpool have to start well and silence the Rangers crowd and make it count. And then if they do that, you go to Amsterdam, you get a draw, you're through pretty much. You might not be going for top spot, but at this point, it doesn't matter about top spot. That's how Liverpool fallen this year, is just get through, get the finances from it, get into the knockout stages and go as far as you can, because it is your, I suppose, your consolation here. It's your backup if the league does continue to fall apart, that you can still get into the Champions League if you have a good European run.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a much more difficult game than it was last week for Liverpool on Wednesday. So let's pick our team for that game. Theo, I'll start with you. Addison will be in goal, but then probably one or two changes across the back four. Obviously, again, comes with the caveat that as we're recording this, we don't know the injury situations. We don't know about Trent. We don't know whether Robertson might be back. But as it stands right now, what would you be going with?
Should we say we assume Trent won't be back? We'll assume Diaz won't be back. Robertson's behind Jones on the recovery, wasn't he? So he might be back in training, say, tomorrow, but they're not going to start him or anything. So that means Tsimikas has to keep his place. And the other three, it's hard. I don't think Virgil Van Dijk was great against Arsenal again. Like, he was standing off too much at the opening goal. I'd be tempted to take him out and just see what a Matip-Konate partnership looks like, to give Konate some minutes there. He was a bit rash when he came on against Arsenal, but at least he's got pace in that back four. And then it's probably going to be Gomez at right back. Personally, if Ramsey's trained enough, I'd like to see Ramsey start this one, because it's against an opponent he knows well, and just keep Gomez in bubble wrap for the week, because I don't want to see James Milner at right back against Man City. You just need to keep Gomez fit so he can play against them on Sunday at right back, and keep Foden or whoever plays there quiet for that game. So, yeah, I'm going to lean towards Ramsey, but I'd expect it to be Gomez.
Yeah, I thought Calvin Ramsey might have played for the under-21s on Saturday, but wasn't involved in that one. Hasn't done a great deal of training, so we don't quite know where he's going to be. But Lynch, is it similar for you? Konate coming in again, didn't think he was particularly brilliant against Arsenal, but not the easiest match to come into. This is probably one where he can sort of stamp his authority a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Klopp will be sort of desperate to get him in the team, because I think he's just trying to find some solution from somewhere that something clicks, something changes things. So maybe Konate coming in with, alongside. I don't think he'll drop Van Dijk, to be honest. I think, he'll try. Maybe that partnership will be the one that solves all Liverpool's problems. And at right back, with Ramsey, I wonder whether we'll sort of see him for a while yet. I just think because the situation is as it is, you don't really want to be throwing in a young player. Obviously, his fitness is not quite there anyway, so it's difficult to pick out a fixture where you think, okay, that would be a nice way to introduce him, because he's not coming into a team that's doing well at all. So I think maybe Joe Gomez to start at right back, and I think he'll keep his place for the City game, of course, if Trent doesn't make it. And then, yeah, Tsimikas at left back probably picks himself. Hopefully, yeah, I think Tsimikas has done okay as the backup there, but I think it would be quite nice to have Robertson back again to get you slightly more back towards what you consider Liverpool's first team, and anything you can get back in terms of when you're coming up against City will be a bonus. But yeah, Tsimikas in for this one.
Right, into the midfield then. I'll stick with you, Lynchy. Give you the difficult decision of, are you going with a 2, or are you going with a 3? I think.
Oh God!
I'll tell you mine first. I'm going to go Fabinho and Henderson. I don't want to risk Thiago ahead of City, so I'm going to go for a 4-2-3-1. Fabinho and Henderson.
I think because of the Diaz injury, I think he might just go back to the 3. I just think that's going to make his mind up, and plus, it wasn't like the 4-2-3-1 was a roaring success at Arsenal either, was it? So I suppose that decision, it's not like he's going to face criticism if he goes back to it. So I think, as he just constantly tries to play this team back into some form, maybe just goes with Henderson, Fabinho, and Thiago maybe, and hopefully with Thiago, as you say, you want to wrap him in cotton wool. I'd agree with that. It's it'd be even worse if he was to be out. But I think just try and get that little unit working again, and maybe with Thiago, if you a couple of goals up, hopefully on around the hour mark, then you can take him out for someone else. That would be the ideal situation, I suppose.
Theo, midfield for you.
Depends on Curtis Jones, really. Like, we know he was back in training, so it depends how available he is. Like, if he's fit enough to start, I'd quite like to see him in a midfield 3, and then you'd have Thiago drop for that. You'd have Fabinho back as the 6. and you'd have Henderson on the right-hand side maybe, but then you could take out either Henderson or Thiago. But like you say at the start, we don't really know yet. Jurgen Klopp won't have his press conference until tomorrow. We won't see him train until tomorrow, and that's when we'll know how close those players are. If you stick with the two, Fabinho's back in anyway. Fabinho needs to play. If they're lacking this defensive solidity, put your actual number 6 in and see what you can do. Like, you might be low on confidence and low on form this year, but it's a formation he knows well from his time with Monaco. And then I'd lean towards Thiago because it's Rangers. You still expect to have a lot of the ball, be able to pass it around him, and that suits him more than Henderson. You think with the options available, it's so hard. It just depends who's coming back, because what would say was the first choice in midfield 3 still looks very slow and was the problem against Brighton. But you just think Rangers surely they've got enough in the locker to beat them. That's not really giving you an answer there, so it depends what you want to do formation-wise. I've given you one for each.
I think with midfield, actually, maybe there's an option for, we haven't seen James Milner for a while, to come back in to replace Henderson on the right hand side of that 3, just as a rotational option, just to, maybe a rest makes Henderson, rediscover his form before the City game. It's a game where you'd expect Liverpool to dominate the ball, so you wouldn't have too many huge worries about runners off the back of James Milner, and that's been a problem for Henderson anyway. So maybe James Milner does come in on that right hand side a little bit.
I'm going to go for Harvey Elliott. I'm going to play him as a 10, but you can use my 11 either as a 4-3-3 with him on the right, or you can play him as a 10. So I'm going to go 4-2-3-1. Elliott as the 10, Salah and Jota either side, and Darwin Nunez through the middle. I suppose that the front 3, Lynch, is going to pick itself. There's not too many of them fit. Well, no, actually, Firmino could come in, couldn't he?
Yeah, but I think Nunez, let's try and capitalise on the confidence boost of a goal. He has in the last couple of games been really good as well, just in his general all-round play. So try and keep that going against a team that you'd hope to get on the score sheet against. And yeah, Jota picks himself on the left-hand side, and Salah, what they've done with him this season has not worked, let's say that. So try and get back to that traditional 4-3-3, him running in off Nunez and getting those runs on the inside, get him in goal scoring positions. Let's see a bit more of that.
Yeah, not particularly work for him. Not particularly working for Diogo Jota either. 19 games it is now without a goal for him. I know he's got assists and that sort of thing, but I think if there's one wish I've got for Wednesday, it's that Diogo Jota finally scores again. But Theo, I assume Diogo Jota is in your 11. Who else is in that front line?
Jota is. Jota's on the left, Nunez up front. It depends if we're doing 2-3-1 or 3. If it's 2-3-1, Carvalho is the number 10, and I'm dropping Mo Salah in either. I thought he was rubbish against Arsenal. He had that one run and shot. If taking him off early and then benching him in a game doesn't give him a kick up the backside for Man City, nothing will. So let's see what Harvey Elliott looks like on the right. Like, it's a position he knows from at Fulham. Knows from Blackburn. He scored goals in the Championship, sort of on Rangers level, if we're being honest, if we're not doing too mean to him, just to see if he can be an actual rotation option there and do something. He's got this relationship with Carvalho anyway, so in a 4-2-3-1 they could link up reasonably well. Otherwise, it's just, can you actually be the Salah understudy on the right hand side? It's your best chance to go and get a goal or something in that position, because we all know Salah's going to start against Man City. So yeah, go for the youth. It's not worked what we've been trying so far. Try something a bit different and hope for the best.
Yes, hope for the best indeed. That might be the best way for Liverpool to go this week generally. But let's finish with our match predictions. I'm going to go 2-0 to Liverpool. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to say a clean sheet. I'm going to say they actually score a goal first for once in a game. Theo, score prediction?
After the game last week, I'd have been confident. After yesterday, I'm not. I'll go 2-1. Yeah, 2-1 Liverpool. But I wouldn't be surprised if Rangers got the early goal and managed to get a draw either.
Are Liverpool going to score first, though? If they don't score first, do Liverpool get something?
If they don't score first, they get a draw. If they score first, they win.
Lynchy?
I think the degree to which Liverpool dominated Rangers last time, I just can't see beyond them winning here, even though confidence is shot. I mean, they still scored twice against Arsenal yesterday. Let's not forget, and had periods where they did play some decent football at times. So it's not. Despite the tone of this podcast and my tone in general, it's not all negative. I think Liverpool should go there, and no matter what team they win, I think they'll pick up at least a 2-0 win.
Yes,
that's another reason why I've named such a youthful team, by the way, because it's not going to have any bearing on what happens against Man City. Just play something else.
try something. Fingers crossed it works. Hopefully Liverpool put themselves in a good position to get through in the Champions League group, and we can have a chat about that on Friday's Blood Red podcast. But I think for now, that will do us. I've been Matt Addison. Thanks to David Lynch and Theo Squires for joining me. We'll catch you next time.